Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Depot Dive. We're going to dive into the week's biggest Steelers-related topics. I'm your host, Ross McCorkle, and above me here on the screen, as always, is Joe Clark. Joe, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, doing well. Weather's a little crappy today, but everything else going well. How are you?
Yeah, doing well. Kara's out of town, so I'm living the bachelor life for this weekend once again. I did get my coffee squared away this time, so I'm not going to
That's
be
good.
caffeine deficient. Yeah, that's right. Um, all right, well, the Steelers are continuing their OTA practices. They had three of them last week with Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. They're going to have another three this week. They already did their fourth there. Actually did the fourth and fifth on Tuesday and Wednesday. So Thursday here we'll be wrapping up this week of OTA practices. And an interesting kind of bit of information came, I think, was that from Tom Pelissero earlier in the week, reporting that the NFLPA, the Players Association, the union, is proposing a change, or they're finalizing a proposal that they will soon, I guess, submit to the NFL, basically to redo some of the offseason schedule. And what that would mean is basically the OTAs, which typically take place here at the end of May into early June, would actually be moved to just before training camp. And so what typically is a break in between OTAs and training camp, that break would kind of be shifted to, immediately following the draft. There would be kind of a lull in the NFL schedule, and they would report back for what would essentially be an elongated training camp. There's been some mixed reactions to this around the NFL landscape, and I know we have our own thoughts, but Joe, if you want to kick things off, just kind of what are your initial reactions to that news?
Yeah, I just don't really see any way that this comes to fruition because in actuality, I mean, who does it benefit? It really just benefits, it's the young players in the league, guys with families, I think kind of from what they've said and from what we've read, kind of relish that month off. Their kids are out of school, they can spend some time with them. Kind of just be at home, take a vacation before, the grind of the season really starts with the training camp. For front office guys, your February, March, free agency, the draft prep through April, you get into rookie mini camp. There's still work to be done filling out the roster after the draft. So there's really no break for those guys. This 1 month, 6 weeks, whatever it is, between when OTAs end and training camp starts is really the only break that a lot of these personnel executives and these players with families get from the game of football. So it's an idea by the NFLPA. It's one that I don't think is going to be well received. I know, and you talked about in this, if if there really is enough support within the NFLPA, which I would be surprised if there was on the player end. I know we had Shelby Harris spoke out against it, but it could be used. If that's what the players want, they can negotiate. They get that, and the NFL gets their wish with an 18-game schedule. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I just don't see any way that that's anything more than just an idea that is talked about a little bit, and it's going to be one of those things that I think will take a little bit to come to fruition if it ever does.
Yeah, I think there's a number of kind of interesting things to talk about surrounding this, and for one, I think it was Zach Frazier just before OTAs was saying, I just received my playbook, last week. Like a lot of people assume that these players get their playbooks immediately following the draft, and it just doesn't seem if the players are not getting their playbooks until closer to OTAs. I mean, obviously they probably give them to them in advance of OTAs if they were moved right before training camp. But I think that the teams kind of value, at least the Steelers seem to value, giving the players, kind of throwing them into the deep end, giving them the playbook, seeing how they kind of adjust with just a few days notice there before the start of OTAs and rookie minicamp and stuff like that. So just taking out a kind of crucial part of that process. I mean, it seems like it would hurt some of the kind of fringe roster players more than anything. I mean, same with if they go to 18 games in the regular season, you're talking about one less preseason game. That's one less opportunity for these fringe roster guys to prove themselves, and kind of a weird changed preseason schedule or offseason training activity schedule is going to further that. And so, the majority of the NFLPA is made up by these fringe roster players. I mean, you'd think there's only 22 or maybe a little bit more than that starters on each team around the league. And so the majority of the 53-man roster is kind of your more depth guys who are trying to prove themselves. And so changing this up, I mean, I don't know if they're going to be able to get the NFLPA support, but the NFL could definitely, like you said, pounce on this as an opportunity to start making some trades for 18-game schedules and, maybe expanding kind of their efforts to have football on every day of the week, which it seems like they're moving towards. So interesting stuff there, but we're going to move into our first actual topic here listed, and that is Juju Smith-Schuster. There was a report, I believe it was at the beginning of last week, from a Patriots beat writer basically saying that Juju's time with the Patriots could be coming to an end. He's still under contract, but they could, release him, and in which case, the Steelers have a need at wide receiver, and so just kind of the easy dot connecting of a former player, maybe circling back to the roster. That's kind of become a talking point here. Will Juju return, and would we want him to return? Joe, I'll let you kind of kick that topic off.
Yeah, I want to preface this by saying that I love Juju when he's on the Steelers, but he's just so not the same player that he once was. I mean, and a lot of that's because of injuries, even though he's young. He's been in the league for so long now that, I mean, he was, 19, 20 when he got drafted, something like that. He was super young when he got drafted. He's the youngest player in his draft class, and the injuries have piled up his knees, just his lower body. I just don't really know how much of a real upgrade he is. I think, they could use him in a big slot role like they did towards the end of his tenure. He can block a little bit, but then you question, where do you leave Roman Wilson? I just don't know if, bringing in Juju to be your number two receiver is that much of an upgrade. He would be cheap, so that's kind of a plus if he's cut by New England. I don't think there's going to be much of a market for him, but I think it says a lot too if he's cut by the Patriots, because I mean, the receiver room's nothing special right now. I know they drafted Jalen Polk and Javon Baker, but then I mean, you're looking at KJ Osborne, Tyquan Thornton, Kendrick Bourne. Kendrick Bourne's all right. He's probably the best of that group, but it's still just not an impressive wide receiver room. And if the Patriots are like, yeah, we really have no use for you, then I think that says a lot about his value and maybe about his medicals too. I mean, there was a report before last season, I think, that his knee was about to explode. He missed a ton of time last year with injuries. I just don't really think it would be, enough of an upgrade to justify bringing him in. And I like the guy. Besides, when he posted his schlong on Snapchat, that was a little weird earlier this off season. But I just don't think he's really a tangible upgrade for what the Steelers are looking to do, and I don't really think there's a clear fit for him in the receiver room as it stands right now.
Yeah, no, I just looking back at his stats the last 2 years, I mean, with Kansas City, he did pretty all right. I mean, 933 receiving yards, 3 touchdowns, 78 receptions. Obviously, that's playing with Mahomes, and Mahomes is going to elevate, any receiver he plays with. And I think that year was right after they moved on from Tyreek Hill, and so they were still trying to figure out who the top receiving targets were. And so Juju benefited from that a little bit there. And then, yeah, moving into New England, he only had 260 receiving yards on 29 receptions. He only actually managed to play in 11 games. So, yeah, I mean, I tend to agree. I mean, I don't think it would be really a needle mover to bring Juju back. But I mean, he does kind of provide some of that blocking. He provides, I mean, the Steelers figure to be a run-first team, and so if they have a slot who's excels in blocking, I know Roman Wilson kind of says the no block, no rock thing, and he has that mentality, but, it might take him a second to kind of get used to the physicality of some of the corners in the NFL, and Juju kind of has that experience, and so if there's something to be gained, it would be kind of as a blocker. But the Steelers could have brought back Allen Robinson the second if they wanted that skill set, and they did not. He ended up signing for pretty cheap with the New York Giants. So yeah, I think Juju probably. I mean, we don't even know if he's going to be cut. First of all, it was just kind of a report, and then if he does, I don't think anybody's going to get too excited if the Steelers bring him in, and I ultimately don't think that they would do that. So moving on to the next topic here. Throughout OTAs this week, actually yesterday, Jaylen Warren kind of spoke about getting involved more in the pass game, and that was something that he excelled at last year. I think he managed to get over 1,000 yards from scrimmage there, all-purpose yards, because of his involvement in the passing game. Najee Harris, on the other hand, really wasn't a factor in the past game at all. His receiving yards have kind of dwindled year over year, especially since Jaylen Warren's been put into the lineup and kind of filled that role. But do you think Najee could have a bigger role in the pass game this year, just given the new offensive system? And kind of which running back do you see being a bigger, beneficiary of this offensive change?
Yeah, as a whole, I think if we do see running backs get used more in the pass game, which I think we will, Warren said it's going to happen. Arthur Smith has used it. I think Najee will have a role. I mean, he had 74 receptions as a rookie, but he kind of surrendered the third down roll back to Jaylen Warren midway through 2022. That was 2 years ago. Yeah. So midway through 2022, he surrendered that role to Warren. So obviously it'll benefit Warren more, I think, given that he will probably retain that third down back row. And we've seen him excel in the passing game. He can take a swing pass and get 15, 20 yards out of it. He's shown that he's really talented as a pass catcher of the backfield. So I think we could really see his numbers kind of take a jump this season, especially as a receiver, if the backs are used more. But I do think Najee will see a bump too. What did he have last year? I think it was with 29 receptions. I mean, he could get back up to 40 receptions, 41, 42. That's what he had in 2022. He had 41. I mean, we're not talking the 74 receptions he had his rookie season, but he could still be a 40, 45 reception guy if they use the running backs more. And Cordero Patterson's in the mix too, so that's definitely a guy that, I mean, he had literally a position, the Joker position created for him on the depth chart last year in Atlanta. He can line out wide, he can be a receiver of the backfield. He was drafted as a receiver, so he's definitely somebody to watch as well if they want to get him involved as maybe a piece on offense. I know we talked about him as a kick returner, but maybe he could be a piece on offense for this team as well with Warren and Harris in the backfield.
Yeah, how much do you think Patterson does get involved? I mean, he's 32 or 33 now, something like that. And we're talking about a guy who is going to fill what is now a pretty important role, being the kick returner. Do they want to, give him extra burn on the offense and risk kind of getting him hurt, given how, I mean, in years past, that probably wouldn't have been a concern, but kick return figures to be kind of a pretty important play now all of a sudden. And they brought him in for that reason. I mean, and also they brought in, we talked about last week, they brought in some of these other running backs to kind of compete. I mean, could that be a signal that they're really not looking? I mean, I know that they have them listed on the depth chart right now, they have them listed on the team website right now as a running back / kick returner. How much do you buy kind of his involvement in the running game?
I think it's really going to depend. I don't think he's going to get that many carries. I know he had a decent number of carries his first years in Atlanta. Last year, his offensive touches kind of fell off after they added Bijan Robinson. They have Robinson and then Algier. 2 years ago, he wasn't competing with much in the backfield. Then he was just competing with Algier. Then he was behind Robinson and Algier. And now in Pittsburgh, he's behind Warren and Harris, who are two quality backs. So I don't think he's going to get a ton of carries. I would be surprised if he had any substantial number of carries, but in the receiving game, I wouldn't be surprised if they line him out. Well, I think it depends, if they do add that, really legitimate number two option. But if they don't, and they have the receiver group that they have right now, I could see Patterson having a role where he lines about wide, maybe get some routes out of the backfield. Um, Nothing like super substantial, but I think he could probably, have more touches than he had last season, even because Arthur Smith has used him before, and he's been productive with Arthur Smith. And if the receiver room's still a little bit murky, then he's kind of another guy that can, fill a variety of roles. And I think it would honestly probably work out pretty well as we said, if he can stay healthy. And yeah, and he is a little bit older, but he's still a dynamic athlete. So I'm very interested to see how he gets used, and I think we'll kind of get more answers to that when we get around training camp. And then obviously, if they do add another receiver, that might murky the waters a little bit for Patterson's usage. But he is somebody that I think could play a bigger role than I think we're initially accounting for right now.
Yeah, and this isn't a officially listed topic here on the screen, but kind of along the same lines. This morning on Get Up, Harry Douglas, former Falcon, I believe, was talking about basically the Steelers, and he thinks that they're going to have a top 5 rushing attack in the NFL this year. They finished 13th last year. They had 2,010 rushing yards, and I believe, what was the number? 1,452 of those came from week 9 and on, which is 72.2% of their rushing yards. So really over the back half of the season, once they inserted Broderick Jones into the lineup, you're talking about what was basically a top, 2 or 3 rushing attack in the NFL. Do you think that they will finish with a top 5 in 2024?
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely see it. I mean, it's going to be tough. There's a lot of teams with a good run game, but the Steelers are going to run the ball. They improve their offensive line through the draft, and Warren and Harris, I think, are both going to take a jump with Arthur Smith's scheme. So I think it kind of tracks that they would be a top 5 run team. I mean, we saw what they looked like with Broderick Jones. There's that Titans game in Week 9 when the run game really took off after a bit of a slow start to start the season, especially on Harris's end, and then things really flipped the switch and they were able to, work. I mean, they set up the pass with the run a little bit, and they got a lot better as a team. So I do think that they're going to run the ball a lot, and Harris and Warren are among the top 20 backs in football. I would say they're probably 2 of the top 20. So with an improved offensive line, I mean, you substitute Mason Cole for Zach Frazier. Zach Frazier's a mauler up front. If Falatanu starts, him and Broderick Jones, I think, are an upgraded offensive tackle than Broderick Jones and Dan Moore even were, especially in the run game. So I think top 5 is a very realistic possibility, and something that they probably should hit by the end of the season.
Yeah, and I think if you look at the top 10 last year, I think 6 or 7 of those teams had mobile quarterbacks that are chipping in extra rushing yards on the ground. The Steelers, I mean, Kenny Pickett has the mobility, but they just didn't really use it much. And every time he would try, he would end up getting injured. And so, having both Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, who are both capable of chipping in some rushing yards on the ground, and then everything you just talked about with the even more run heavy system under Arthur Smith and the improvements along the offensive line. And I mean, honestly, I would be a little bit disappointed if they don't hit top 5 in rushing for the season, just given what they did the back half of last year. And I think I wrote about this maybe a week or 2 ago, and I know things change in the NFL year to year. It's not just as simple as looking at what happened last year and kind of projecting out, but I think the Steelers actually play 8 games against basically bottom 10 defenses in yards gained last year. And so they're going to have an opportunity to put up a lot of yards. I mean, some of these teams will improve, but you'd think, at least some of that remains the same. Some of the issues stay the same. And so the Steelers are going to have some opportunities to really put some yards on people. And I think the rushing in particular is going to be huge for them this year. Moving on to our third topic here. Lately, there's been a few different examples of this. I think the latest example is the quarterbacks taking their offensive line to Capitol Grill for some bonding time. There was also the Pirates game back closer to the season opener at PNC Park there. And so it seems like there's been a lot of good kind of quality bonding amongst the team. And you think about some of the leadership issues last year and some of the just kind of locker room not being as cohesive last year. This seems like a good sign to me.
Yeah, 100%. I know Broderick Jones said that the offense line, likes to go out to dinner once a week. And now that incorporating the quarterbacks into that can kind of he said it makes a huge difference getting to know those guys on a personal level and just building that relationships. It builds a deeper level of trust. And on the field, quarterbacks have to trust their offensive line. The offensive line has to trust their quarterbacks. Quarterbacks making changes at the line, identifying coverages, identifying blitzes, and so, I mean, the center helps out with that as well. But there has to be a very big measure of trust or layer of trust between the offensive line and the quarterbacks, and getting to know each other on a deeper level and a personal level, in addition to how they are on the field and trusting them to do their job on the field. It definitely helps. And great to see that, Wilson and Fields are kind of, taking care of the guys that take care of them on the field, taking them out for a nice steak dinner. It only stands to benefit the Steelers in the long run. I mean, just having, positive vibes and having the, leadership can kind of formulate that way. And then obviously that layer of trust. So you love to see it. It's awesome, especially this early, into the off season.
Yeah, and I think it was just earlier this week, Tom Brady appeared on The Herd with Colin Cowherd, and he talked a lot about how important it is to have a relationship with the offensive line, and he talked specifically about the kind of relationship with his centers over the years. And I think it was maybe earlier, sometime before the draft. I think maybe Jim Harbaugh was talking about how important offensive linemen are because they're the only position on the team that their play isn't reliant on anybody else. Everybody's reliant on their play, and so yeah, just echoing a lot of what you said with how important those relationships are. And then even beyond the quarterback to offensive line dynamic, it seems like there's some good stuff brewing on the quarterback front in between Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. It seems that, yesterday, Wilson basically vouched for a specialized package for Fields. And so you think about, most starting quarterbacks aren't going to want to be taken off the field very much, usually aren't too excited about that kind of thing happening. And so Russell Wilson coming out and saying, you know what, yeah, I'd be okay with that. And I think that was a tweet put out by 93.7 The Fan that we wrote that off of. And so that's encouraging to see. And I think, having all these offensive linemen that are kind of drafted together, going through the rookie growing pains together, that kind of stuff's going to be good. And so I think there's a lot to like in terms of the offensive cohesion at this point. It's obviously May, and this is the kind of stuff that's, easy to write about right now. Once games start happening, and if losses start happening, and all of the problems can come back in the media. I promise that can and probably will happen at some point in the season. But right now, it's pretty encouraging.
Yeah, it's Wilson and Fields. I think it helps that Fields, Wilson is a player that he kind of grew up. He said he would play him all those game after, so it's probably a player he's excited to work next to and learn whatever Wilson has to offer. And then in Wilson, it's almost Fields is more athletic than a younger Wilson was, and Wilson was very athletic when he was younger as a young quarterback. And Fields kind of takes that to another level, so it's almost like a younger version of himself, and you can mentor him. I mean, we heard all these concerns about how Wilson was going to be as a teammate, but so far, seemingly, I mean, he's passed with flying colors. Like you said, if things, get a little more tenuous and get difficult later, maybe that changes. We can't say for sure, but as of right now, all the signs coming out of Pittsburgh, I mean, are very positive.
Yes, indeed. We're going to move into our listener question here. So this is a good time to plug the number at the bottom of the screen there. It's 412-254-3145. Give us a call, leave a voicemail for a chance to have your question answered on a future episode. I also want to plug, because I've been forgetting to do this in the recent episodes, if you're watching this on YouTube, please do subscribe to the channel. We got excellent content pretty much every day of the week. We have the Terrible Take, which myself and Joe, we have an episode each week, and then Josh and Alex and Dr. Melanie Friedlander, a bunch of people that kind of rotate on that. They got the Terrible Podcast every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Pretty much a constant stream of videos coming your guys' way, so please do like this video and subscribe to the channel. And we're going to move into our listener question. They didn't leave a name, but here we go.
Hey, Ross and Joe, first time, long time here. I'm wondering, you see a lot of stuff on those old takes exposed on Twitter and stuff, people trying to make those crazy predictions. I want your crazy prediction for this season. We're either going to go back to the end of the year and say, man, this guy was off as a rocker, or man, this guy's the modern day Nostradamus. Thank you guys. Love the pod. Bye.
All right. Our listeners trying to get us in trouble on hot old takes exposed. So do you have one ready here? I don't want to put you on the spot.
Yeah, I mean, it's not going to be super hot takey. I'm not going to give you the Steelers are going to win the Super Bowl. But I think would be a pretty significant leap. I'm going to go with that George Pickens will be an All-Pro this season. If you look at the receiver room right now, who else is really going to get the bulk of the touches? So I think Pickens is going to get the ball a lot. The issue right now, when you look at it, is he's probably also going to get double teamed a lot. But I think Arthur Smith is going to be creative in the way he can use him. He can isolate him a little bit. And even then, Pickens is the contested catch wizard. So even if he is covered, he can still come down with the ball. I think if they do add another receiver, then the ball gets spread around a little bit more. Maybe the later that goes down. But after the way he ended the season last year, the big game against the Bengals, he had a couple big games. I think, putting it together more consistently this season, I think he could certainly be an all-pro. Maybe not first team, probably not first team, but If I have to throw out a hot take, it's that George Pickens will be an All-Pro in 2024.
Yeah, I like that one. Pickens had 1,140 receiving yards, 63 receptions, 5 touchdowns for 18.1 yards per reception, which that last figure led the league. If you look at the second team All-Pro list, the two kind of lowest production on that list were Mike Evans of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, 1,255 yards, 79 receptions, 13 touchdowns, 15.9 yards per reception average. And then Brandon Ayuk of the San Francisco 49ers, 1,342 yards, 75 receptions, 7 touchdowns, 17.9 yards per reception. And so Pickens really doesn't need to improve a whole lot to kind of match some of the bottom of the second team All-Pro numbers. So yeah, I agree. I think second team All-Pro would be a good goal for him. I know he expressed frustration, being snubbed from the Pro Bowl, but it would be awesome to get him in both the Pro Bowl and a second team All-Pro list for him there. And obviously this is a contract year for him. He won't be a free agent next year, but the Steelers do typically choose to extend their rookies, a year before their contracts expire. And so this would kind of be the year for him to make a statement for himself, to have the Steelers re-sign him to a big deal. And there's been some pretty big wide receiver deals lately. I think Jaylen Waddle just signed this morning for a pretty large deal. And so that market continues to be red hot, and Pickens will no doubt want to cash in on that. For my kind of hot take, I don't know if I'm 100% kind of behind this, but I do think there's a pretty decent chance that the Baltimore Ravens finish last in the AFC North. I personally am more scared of the Browns and the Bengals this year. The Browns finishing, 11-6 last year with Dorian Thompson-Robinson and Joe Flacco having to start a bunch of games for him. The Bengals have pretty much been a Super Bowl contender every season that Joe Burrow has been healthy, and so far it's looking like that will be the case. And so I think the Achilles heel, which I wrote kind of an Achilles heel for each AFC North team on the site, I think on Sunday, the Achilles heel for the Ravens is their offensive line. And we were talking about that earlier. Every other position relies on the offensive line to play well. And I think they had 3 offensive linemen leave the team since last year. They traded away Morgan Moses. They lost Zeitler in free agency. Who else did they lose? One other guy.
John Simpson.
Yeah, John Simpson. And so that's a whole lot of starts that they need to replace. They did draft Roger Rosengarten. I think he's going to be a fine NFL player. I do think he probably needs a little bit of time. He's a little bit light. I think he's only like 308 pounds. So he probably needs to pack on a little bit more weight and probably needs a little time to adjust to, NFL defensive linemen that are going to be much bigger than him. So I think the Ravens are in for some struggles on offense. And, last year they were one of the top offenses and one of the top defenses. I think their defense will still be fine, but man, that offense could see some regression with a rough offensive line. And so I think they could finish in last place there. What are your thoughts on that?
I definitely kind of agree that right now, I mean, maybe it's just because of the Steelers' success against the Ravens and because that game takes on another layer, but I would say I'm probably a little bit more concerned of the Browns and the Bengals. And yeah, that offensive tackle spot right now, especially for Baltimore, is a huge hole. It's either Rosengarten or Daniel Falele. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but it's going to be one of those two. And again, I mean, you're going up against some very good edge rushers in the AFC North, especially TJ Watt. So it's gonna be interesting to see, and how's that going to affect the run game? I know they added Derrick Henry, but if you don't have a good offensive line, then it's going to be struggle to have a good run game. So I definitely think the Ravens could, regress a little bit this year, and we've seen it happen before. They have a really strong season and then, take a little bit of a step back the next year. So definitely a real possibility. And another thing with them too is just all the coaching turnover. I mean, they lost Mike McDonald, they lost Anthony Weaver, they lost Denard Wilson. So they lost a lot of, defensive coaches, front office. They lost some guys, but, kind of can replace with them within there, which they did with the coaching stuff. But going to be interesting to see how everything meshes for them this season.
Yeah, and Lamar Jackson losing some weight behind a diminished offensive line. I don't know if he's going to come to look back on that decision as a good thing. I mean, maybe he'll evade more would-be sacks or tacklers, but man, he's probably figures to get hit a little bit more than he's used to in recent years. So That is everything for our show. Again, give the channel a subscribe and a like, and give the number at the bottom of the screen a call, 412-254-3145. Leave us a question for a future episode. Thank you guys for listening, and we'll catch you next time.